Hello National 5, it's Mr. Neil here. In this video we're going to continue looking at website design development, focusing in on Cascading Style Sheets or CSS. For the purposes of National 5 Computing Science, you need to be able to describe, exemplify, implement both internal and external cascading style sheets, using a variety of selectors, classes and IDs, and implementing different properties including font family, font size, colour, alignment and background colour. By the end of this session you will be able to utilise a variety of HTML tags, including the div tag. You'll be able to identify and implement internal and external CSS using a range of selectors, classes and IDs, and you'll be able to change a range of properties using CSS. Firstly, let's consider what is CSS. Well, cascading style sheets can be used to add style to web pages. Whilst HTML will tell the browser what the content should be on the page, CSS tells the browser how it should be displayed. So you can think about the CSS as the clothes that a person might wear. They can wear different clothes and they will look slightly differently. There's an online project called CSS Zen Garden, and believe it or not, these two websites here in front of you have the exact same HTML. All the styling that has been applied to it is through the CSS. The CSS used in these web pages is a way beyond what we need to know for National 5, but it's really powerful to show you where CSS can take you. At National 5 we can implement CSS in two different ways. The first way is internal CSS. This is where CSS is contained within each HTML page. This means that the style is only applied to that individual page. The CSS is included in the head of the page, and if we look over on the right you can see that we have a new tag in our head called style, and all our CSS will appear inside this style tag. Just like every tag, it's really important when we open the style tag we close it. Sometimes when candidates don't close the style tag they think their page isn't loading, and that's just because the browser doesn't know where the CSS stops and the HTML starts. So it's really important that you close this style tag. The second method of implementing CSS is using an external style sheet. And this is where the CSS is contained in a file by itself, and we then link that within the head of the HTML document. That means multiple HTML documents can all refer to the same CSS style sheet. If we look at over the example on the right, we can see within the head we include a link tag. We say that that link has taken us to a style sheet, and that the file is called styles.css or style.css. So somewhere in our file system there will be this file that we are then able to edit. There's a specific way that CSS must be written. This is called the CSS syntax. There are three main parts to CSS syntax. Firstly, the declaration block is applied to a single HTML selector. So we must specify before any CSS which HTML selector we are going to edit. Our declaration block starts with a curly bracket and it closes with a curly bracket. If you don't have these curly brackets, your CSS is unlikely to work. Within the declaration block we have properties and values. So a property is a thing that we are changing about the selector, and the value is what we're changing it to. In this example we're changing the colour of H1 to be orange and the font family of H1 to be Arial. You will notice that the property and the value are separated by colons, and each declaration is separated by a semicolon. Again, if you do not have these colons and semicolons, your CSS might not work. This is the different things that we can use CSS to do. We can use CSS to change the background colour of an element, the text colour of an element, the font of an element, particularly a text-based element, the size of the text within an element, the alignment of the text within an element, and the width and the height of an element. Let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. Starting with background colour and colour. Notice firstly that colour is spelt the American way. That is because CSS was developed in America. It won't work if you spell it the British way with a U. If we have a look at the CSS on the right, we can see that we have set the background colour for the body. And remember, the body is everything that appears on the page. So we have set the background colour of body to be yellow, so our whole page is yellow. For H1, we've set the background colour to the RGB value 249,888,247, which turns out as a shade of pink. The colour to the RGB value 249,255,65, which turns out to be a shade of yellow. So RGB stands for red, green and blue, and it represents the amount of red in a colour, the amount of green in a colour, and the amount of blue in a colour. So we can use the name of the colour, or we can use an RGB value. The paragraph, again, we have changed the background colour of this and the colour of this, but we've used this hex code. So a hex code is another way of representing colours. The first two values refer to the amount of red, the second two values refer to the amount of green, and the last two values refer to the amount of blue. So hex F95823 is an orange, hex F9FFFE is an off-white. Really important with a hex code colour that we put the hashtag before it to specify that it is a hex colour. You'll notice here that I've got the semicolons between my declarations. Let's now have a look at font family, text size and text alignment. Font family is changed by using the font family tag. Where the font that we want to use is one word, we can just type that word in. Where the font that we want to use is multiple words, we need to make sure that that word is in between quotation marks. We can modify the alignment of the text by using the text align property. And the values for text align are left by default, centre and right. And you can see here each one has been placed in the centre and our paragraph has been right aligned. We can also change the font size by either using points or pixels. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but try and be consistent. You'll notice that my heading is 12 points and my paragraph is 24 pixels. And they're slightly different units, so pick one and go for it. Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint and applications like those use points, so that's probably the size that you're most familiar with. We can also control the height and the width of elements. Probably these would be images and video using CSS. The property is simply width and height. And just like in HTML, we can set the width and the height using a pixel value or by using a percentage value. You can see here my image is 200 by 200 pixels and my video is taking up 100% of the screen. So that's all the different properties that you need to be able to use and modify at National 5. An element of HTML that we've not yet covered is the div tag. The HTML div tag is used to define a section of your HTML document. With the div tag, you can group together large sections of HTML and then format them with CSS. In the example here, you'll notice that we have a number of cities and each city is in a div. If I look at this in my browser, I've set it up that each city has a yellow background. When I look at the CSS that has been implemented, I've said that the div will have a background colour of yellow. So because these here have all been dived, each section or division has a yellow background. We can further customise that and be more specific about how we want the divs to be styled and other HTML tags by using a class attribute. The class attribute is used to specify a class for an HTML element. Multiple elements within a document can share the same class. If we look at the image on the right, you will notice that Edinburgh and Glasgow, being Scottish cities, are in blue, Manchester, an English city, in red, and Cardiff, a Welsh city, in green. If we look at the HTML for this document, you'll notice that we have taken the div and we've added a class called Scotland to it. Just like for Manchester, we've added a class called England. For Glasgow, we've added a class called Scotland. And for Wales, we've added a class called Wales. Within the CSS for this document, we then specify how we would want each class to be defined. We specify that we're talking about a class by using a full stop and then the name of that class. So the class Scotland has a background colour blue. The class England has a background colour red. The class Wales has a background colour green. And that gives us this page here. Another way we can specify certain aspects that we want to edit is using the ID attribute. And the ID attribute is used to identify one specific HTML selector. You cannot use an ID more than once within a single HTML document. You will notice here that Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland, has been styled so that it is yellow and it is slightly bigger than the other headings. If we look at the HTML, we've added an ID to the H2 tag and we've called it Scotland Capital. If we then look at the CSS for this document, we have said that the ID, which is symbolised by the hashtag, the ID Scotland Capital, has the colour yellow and the font size 22, and it is that makes it bigger than the rest. So that has us covered the CSS required for National 5, along with looking at CSS selectors, classes and IDs, and the different properties that we need to utilise at National 5. What I would like you now to do is, using the content within this video, is complete the website on the right hand side. You'll be able to find that online at the address on the screen. If you're not sure or you get stuck, you can rewatch the video or look at the slide deck. You'll also find help on the W3C Schools website.